It also means, though, that we still have to land the most important part of the work, which is making sure that discrimination stops and doesn't happen again.
Tonight, the final hurdle is cleared to compensate families affected by Canada's child welfare system.
I was finding Chuck's heart, and it was pretty good.
Plus, teens from James Bay Cree Nations learn medical care.
We've seen in the last few years the exponential rise of Indigenous contemporary practice.
And a Montreal museum is bringing an Indigenous lens to art. Good evening, Tansei Anin. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. Thousands of First Nation children and families will finally be compensated for discriminatory acts by the child welfare system. The Canadian Human Rights Tribunal approved a $23 billion agreement offered by the federal government after rejecting a $20 billion offer reached last year. Here's Annette Francis with more.
For Cindy Blackstock, a final deal is long overdue. The agreement follows a compensation order issued by the tribunal in 2019 and settles two class action lawsuits dealing with First Nations child welfare and Jordan's principal.
I think that this is an appropriate deal in terms of not excluding anybody. The last one, of course, disentitled some claimants and left others in uncertainty, and that's been fixed in this one, so that's a good thing.
It comes after the tribunal refused to approve last year's $20 billion deal. Cindy Blackstock, executive director of the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society, said that agreement left out some eligible claimants, so $3.4 billion was added to the settlement.
What it means is that justice, at least in terms of compensation, can be achieved for them in alignment with the tribunal's orders. It also means, though, that we still have to land the most important part of the work, which is making sure that discrimination stops and doesn't happen again.
The original complaint was filed back in 2007 by Blackstock and the Assembly of First Nations, but she says there's still some final steps to be taken.
Now it goes on to federal court. The tentative date I've heard of is in October. Then the federal court makes a decision. It will likely approve it, but of course that's always up to the court. And once that happens, then the class action lawyers, along with some other experts, are going to begin the process of rolling out the supports and then the funding to the victims. So likely the compensation will not roll out until late summer 2024 or early fall.
According to Blackstock, it's estimated that up to 300,000 people could be eligible. Government records, for the most part, will determine who is eligible. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau did a major shakeup of his cabinet on Wednesday, hoping to put a new face on a Liberal government that has struggled in recent months. APTN's Fraser Needham talked to a few Indigenous stakeholders to get their thoughts. Here's that story.
Mark Miller and David Lametti are out as Ministers of Crown, Indigenous Relations and Justice, respectively. And in are Gary Andesandaguri in Crown Indigenous Relations and Arif Virani in Justice. Métis National Council President Cassidy Caron says the organization will be watching closely how the recently introduced Bill C-53, which formally recognizes Métis governments in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario, unfolds after the changes.
You know, there was a lot of unknowns with the legislation before it was tabled. Of course, with cabinet confidence, people can't see what is in that legislation until it is tabled. So now that it's tabled, now that it's public, I'm hopeful that people are taking a look at what this legislation is.
Congress of Aboriginal Peoples National Vice President Kim Bode says his organization was surprised to see Lametti shuffled out of Justice, and they will be monitoring how this affects the case of two First Nation sisters from Saskatchewan who have been fighting for years to have their murder convictions overturned.
Like, we're dealing with Marissa and Odelia Quaisance right now, and I hope it doesn't delay that process. It could. It takes quite a while for a new minister to get up to speed on their files. So, yeah, it's that one again is another surprising one to me.
NDP MP Laurie Idlout says the party believes cabinet changes were necessary, and despite good intentions, the government still has a lot of catch-up work to do on reconciliation with Indigenous peoples.
It just seems obvious that reconciliation is not enough of a priority with this Liberal government.
Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Well, we want to hear what you think about the cabinet shakeup and any other thoughts. Here's how you can continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca, or you can leave us a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. The body of a man found in the St. Lawrence River earlier this month has been identified. Akwesasne Police Service confirms that it is Casey Oakes. Oakes went missing in March of this year. He was linked to 8 foreign nationals who were found dead in the St. Lawrence at the same time. They were trying to cross illegally from the United States through Akwesasne Mohawk territory. The investigation into his death and theirs is continuing, according to police. All right, we have to step aside for a moment. Still to come, a new app hopes to help people leave gang life behind.
You're going to want to press that link and watch those videos and hear that message about the impact on your life.
Welcome back to APTN National News. Help is only a text message away for Manitoban youth trying to leave the gang life behind, thanks to a new digital prevention campaign inspired by video games.
Hey, I'm having a party later tonight. You guys should come by. It'll be fun. Yeah, she's new, but she's already my top earner. So, who's ready to party?
The Gang Life is No Life campaign is made up of 3 short videos touching on drugs, exploitation, and violence. Current slang and dark imagery similar to a popular video game franchise is used throughout to catch teenagers' attention. The RCMP and Winnipeg Police Services partnered with ex-gang members and youth support organization The Link to develop the program. Their CEO, Carrie Urban Ross, says a simple anonymous text message to the phone line will help youth who feel there is no way out of the gang life.
You're going to want to press that link and watch those videos and hear that message about the impact on your life and on your future if you're involved in gangs. And also, most importantly, hearing that there's hope and that there's a person or people that are ready to wrap around you, will not judge you, and provide you that protection and the services you need to create that off-ramp. But the one thing that's really important, getting back to the anonymity, is that the youth will lead that process. We're not going to go out in cars and pick them up and say we're going to rescue you. We're going to say when you're ready, you let us know, and we're here for you.
Today is the official opening of the 2023 World Police and Fire Games. The 10-day multi-sport Olympic-style competition features athletes from over 70 countries. As many as 8,500 participants are expected to be in Winnipeg for the Games. But tonight's opening ceremonies will also be the focus of a protest. For more, we're joined by James Wilt with the group Winnipeg Police Cause Harm. James, thanks so much for joining us here today. You recently wrote an opinion piece on why the World Police and Fire Games in Winnipeg sends the wrong message. Can you explain why?
Absolutely, yeah. So since the summer of 2020, we've seen a lot of protest and resistance against police violence in Winnipeg and, of course, around the world. And this has most recently culminated in the blockade at Brady and the families and loved ones of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people who are calling out the Winnipeg Police specifically for their inaction in searching the landfill. And so we think because of this recent history and because of what is going on in terms of the demands to search at Brady and Prairie Green in the context of police inaction, we think it is grossly inappropriate for the World Police and Fire Games to be hosted in Winnipeg. Further, these games are costing a great deal of public funds. Altogether, we've calculated that they're costing about $9.3 million between the 3 levels of government, and we think that that's money that could be far more effectively used to keep people safe through things like housing, safe consumption sites, food distribution, and so on.
Well, and James, the Athletes Village it's going to be pretty close to the Camp Mercedes that's set up, a camp by people calling for the landfills to be searched for their loved ones. Why do you think that's problematic?
For sure. I went down there the other day to just check in on how they're doing, and it is like immediately beside Camp Mercedes. And quite ironically, Athletes Village has a teepee of its own, but the entire Athletes Village is fenced off. It's accessible only to athletes, family members, organizers, and volunteers, which means that people who want to use the forks for any other means during what would be sort of the peak of summer are denied access. And this includes people at Camp Mercedes and the families and loved ones of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. And so we think that this is, I think that this is like a really exemplary instance of why the World Police and Fire Games are so inappropriate, is that there are going to be up to 8,500 more police, immigration agents, correctional officers, and so on, who are going to be at the Athletes Village. And it's kind of almost salt in the wound, the fact that these families and loved ones have been fighting for police to do something, to do anything, but we're just seeing increased repression against these people. So I think it's just a really bad look for Winnipeg that attempts to pride itself on supposed reconciliation, and it's going to be a tough time for Camp Mercedes to deal with the fact that there's going to be so many more people like this in their vicinity.
Well, and there is a protest planned for tonight for the opening ceremonies. So who's taking part in that, and sort of what's expected from that?
For sure. So we're starting at Central Park at 5 p.m. and leaving at 5:30 p.m. And the idea here is that there's a long-standing bike ride called Critical Mass, and the idea of that is just to take up space in the streets, and so this has been going on for a long time, and so it just so happens that it falls on the last Friday of every month, which coincides with the opening ceremonies of the Games, and so there will be many people who will be coming out, and we will be doing a bike ride throughout the downtown and meeting up with people who are on foot at around Broadway and Hargrave, which is adjacent to the opening ceremonies pathway to Canada Life Centre. And the idea there is just to have a really visible representation of opposition to the Games, that not all of Winnipeg supports these Games, and the extensive use of public funding to do so. So we're going to be calling for obviously searching of the landfills and for money to be used for other things that actually help keep people safe instead of just parties for cops from out of town.
And James, last one for you here quickly. The Games run for 10 days. Do you anticipate any other protests happening?
I think so, and I believe that the Games themselves are anticipating them as well. It's been reported that there are special protest zones that are being set up at each of the events. We'll see how things go at those sorts of spaces, but I think the idea is certainly to keep the momentum going. I don't think there's an intent to necessarily disrupt the athletes or the sports themselves, but it's just to, again, visibly remind people who are coming in from out of town that Winnipeggers do not support the use of public funds in this way, and that we're going to continue to call for other uses of public funds, not only during the Games, but well beyond it as well.
And James, we'll have to leave it there, but we certainly appreciate you coming in and taking some time for us.
Thanks so much for having me.
And as mentioned, a large protest is planned for this evening ahead of the opening ceremony for the Games. A statement to APTN News from the Chief Operating Officer of the Games says they respect everyone's right to freedom of expression and that everyone has different opinions. They say they are thankful and grateful for everyone working together to have a safe and positive experience over the next 10 days. And we'll have more on this story on Monday. Well, high school students from 4 Western James Bay Cree Nations attended Queen's University in Kingston this week to see if they want to explore a career in the medical field. Annette Francis explains how technology helped them get hands-on experience.
This week's career camp isn't just for fun and play. It's a chance for some hands-on learning.
Is it like more down, or? I think you're in a pretty good spot. I think what you might need to do is maybe to push a little.
It's the first time 19-year-old Alicia Sutherland has seen an ultrasound.
I was finding Chuck's heart, and yeah, it was pretty good. I was like seeing the heart pump and like the valves and everything. That was great.
Sutherland is from Fort Albany First Nation. She is one of 15 students taking part in the program.
Those are the valves. And then this is a vessel. This is probably what is called papillary muscle that you can see.
It's the second year that Queen's University partnered with the Winnebago Area Health Authority. The program's intent is to inspire youth to work in the medical field to provide health care in their communities. This year they came from Attawapiskat, Moosonee, Moose Factory, and Fort Albany. Dr. David Taylor says it's meant to provide them a glimpse of health professions.
What careers they could pursue and how they would go about training to become a nurse, a physician, a physiotherapist, occupational therapist. There are so many opportunities out there, and they're just so hard for them to see and access from their communities that we want to provide that vision.
Over the course of the week, the students will do workshops on anatomy.
He might have a cough, he might have difficult breathing depending on what the scenario entails.
And have an opportunity to check out the university's high-tech virtual reality simulation lab, where they can perform surgery on a mannequin with interaction through a headset. There's also suturing techniques.
Beautiful. Okay. All right. And so now the question is how to tie it.
It's the perfect place for 16-year-old Darlene Ludet, who's from Attawapiskat. Her favorite workshop so far is learning how to suture.
I want to become a surgeon. And I've been wanting to become a surgeon since I was in 2nd grade.
Why do you think a surgeon?
Just to help people.
According to Taylor, the plan is to expand the program to include students from Peawanuck and Saskatchewan First Nations next year, something Sutherland recommends.
They should definitely sign up for next year because it's really fun, especially the ones who want to get into the health field, the medical field. It's pretty cool.
Annette Francis, APTN National News, Kingston, Ontario.
All right, it's time to pause the news program one final time here. A look at the forecast heading into the weekend is coming up. Plus, Indigenous creativity is on display in Montreal.
If you go up close, there's so many different personalities, different characters inside them.
Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. A grizzly and its cub were spotted along the Skeena River on Gitxsan, Columbia. That's an absolutely wonderful photo there, captured by regular contributor Clarence Jones. Thanks so much for that, Clarence. If you want to be featured as our photo of the day, be sure to email your shots to share@aptn.ca, or you can tag APTN News on Instagram. All right, now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Beginning on the East Coast, 26 in showers in St. John's and 28 in Halifax. 18 degrees in rain in Happy Valley Goose Bay and 14 in Cartwright. 22 in a mix of sun and cloud in Quebec City and 24 in rain in Montreal. Some showers in 27 in Toronto and 20 in Sault Ste. Marie. 23 in showers in Wawa and 23 in Sioux Lookout. 22 degrees in Churchill and showers in 26 in Thompson. Clear and 24 in Barons River and clear and 25 in Winnipeg. 25 in Regina and 23 in Saskatoon. Some showers in 23 in Buffalo Narrows and 26 in Stony Rapids. Continuing west at 26 in Fort Chipewyan and 23 in Peace River. Showers in 22 in Edmonton and 23 in Lethbridge. 23 degrees in Victoria and 22 in Bellacoola. 26 degrees in Smithers and 27 in Fort Nelson. 26 and some showers in Dawson and 27 in Mayo. 26 in Wrigley and 26 in Norman Wells. Clear and 25 in Inuvik and 22 in Colville Lake. Clear and 21 in Cambridge Bay and 18 in Baker Lake. 16 degrees and clear in Iqaluit, and 15 in Kingite. The Fine Arts Museum of Montreal has appointed its first ever Indigenous arts curator. They've been on the job for less than 2 months, and they're looking forward to bringing more visibility to Indigenous art. Amelia Fournier has more.
If you go up close, there's so many different personalities, different characters inside them. Like how many beings are in this one, and the wood grain looks so fine and soft.
Artist, curator, and author Leolia Shragi has traveled around the world meeting Indigenous creatives.
We've seen in the last few years the exponential rise of Indigenous contemporary practice, and with this exhibition you can see also that many artists who work in customary forms are innovating, and they're also taking their just place in the contemporary art space.
Shragi eventually landed the job of Indigenous arts curator at the Fine Arts Museum of Montreal, where they are admiring Tahltan Tlingit artist Dempsey Bob's exposition, which launched about a month before they started their new job.
It feels like a really beautiful alignment of energies and the right kind of opening to Indigenous artists of the Americas for someone like me coming from a bit further afield.
Shragi is a member of the Samoan clans of Samoan-Tufa and Tautua from the Samoan Islands in the Pacific Ocean.
As an oceanic Indigenous person, water is a sacred connector, it's a highway, and so the connection with the rivers and the lakes here is a way for me to really feel grounded and connected to everyone.
Shragi identifies as Fa'afine, a Samoan fluid gender identity, roughly translating to in the manner of a woman. There are also Fa'afatama people in Samoan culture, roughly translating to in the manner of a man.
Fa'afafine and Fatama are really known for being the language teachers, the storytellers, the dancers, the aesthetes. In other archipelagos, a similar gender formation would be the people who hold cultural knowledge and who are kind of like extra parents.
In their role as Indigenous arts curator, Shragi says they will bring more programming for Indigenous peoples locally and internationally, including welcoming community groups and more Indigenous solo exhibitions.
I'm really looking forward to continuing to champion Indigenous practice from here and from around the world in this place. It's well needed in Quebec.
Emilia Fournier, APTN National News, Montreal.
The Yukon could be hosting the Arctic Winter Games earlier than expected. That's because it's tossing its hat in the ring to host the 2026 Games. The territorial government is committing over $4 million in financial support, as well as an additional $350,000 worth of in-kind contributions. Yamal, Russia was scheduled to host the 2026 Games, but was booted by the Games International Committee for its attack on Ukraine. Yukon's capital city of Whitehorse was set to hold the Games in 2020, but it was forced to cancel due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It's not set to host again until 2032. Territorial officials say the Games are expected to cost $9.5 million and won't require any new infrastructure. Certainly be keeping an eye on the decision for that. All right, that's going to wrap up our show for this Friday, July 28th edition of APTN National News. For more Indigenous news, you can check out our website, aptnnews.ca. For all of us here, thank you so much for joining us. Miigwech, Kinaskmatin, and have a great night and weekend.